everyone. This is Dr. Gail Goodreads, and I am Dr. Gail Dawson. My brother Gary and his wife Eunice live on Long Island. We've gone to visit them many times, and one of our favorite things to do is to take the Long Island Railway into New York City. Because they've been there so often, they are very familiar with the city. It's like having our own personal tour guides. We love the excitement and the endless energy of that place. One of the things that makes the experience so unique and wonderful is to visit the art museums with Eunice as our guide. You see, she went to school to become an art teacher and earn a master's degree in art education. New York has some of the most famous art pieces in the world. Her knowledge base is extensive, and she can explain why a particular work is influential and what it represents. She's also a very celebrated artist in her own right. Everyone knows that the paintings that hang on the walls in the famous museums are dominated by male artists, although I don't remember anyone ever explaining why. I always assumed that it had something to do with the curator's choice, and that these positions were filled by men who had limited exposure to the work of women artists because there just weren't very many of them. The real story of why men dominate the art world runs much deeper. The book we're going to talk about today is called Women Artists. During a recent visit to my family on Long Island, I found it on one of the shelves. My interest in the exposure and celebration of W.A.V.Es, which stands for Women of Ambition, Virtue, and Empowerment, caused me to pick it up and browse through it. This book is about women artists, and it represents the extensive collection in the National Museum of Women in the Arts in Washington, D.C. It's filled with stories of women who were gifted in the arts, had ambition and expression, but because of their gender, they lacked the opportunity to get exposure, to be recognized and appreciated. I wondered what Eunice knew about this particular aspect of art history. I asked if she would participate in an interview, and she agreed. What follows is a candid and heartfelt story of her journey and her explanation of the barriers that women face in the art world. All right. Hi. So this is Dr. Gail, and I am Dr. Gail Dawson. And at the current moment, I am sitting down with my sister-in-law, Eunice Vega Dawson, who has a history in art, and we are going to talk about some of the problems that women had to face as artists, but we're also going to start with a little bit of her background.
Hi, Gail. So I'm not a doctor, but I am a teacher. I was a teacher for 30 years. I've always liked to draw and paint, and I didn't know what I was going to do after getting my bachelor's degree in art, and I ended up teaching for the professors at the school, setting still lives up and helping other students. So they asked me to continue my teaching career, and that's what I did. I finished a master's, and I started teaching in, I think 1986 in Farmingdale Public Schools on Long Island, New York, and I did that for 30 years. It was absolutely wonderful just being with the kids, doing after school activities. We won competitions, Olympics of the Visual Arts, upstate New York, and a lot of them came in first place, second, or first. So they did awesome, and it was wonderful to see their faces when they actually won. And even though we were going through all this, there were barriers, even for the kids. So it's funny that you're asking me if there was barriers.
Yeah, because the conversation wanted to go in a direction of, are there barriers for women artists, as historically we know that there have been, and we have to talk about that, but I didn't realize that there was barriers for the kids as well.
Oh, yeah. So, it's the kids that wanted to hang out versus the kids that had the talent to do some of the work. But it worked out because they learned to take those kids on and teach them. And so the kids had a chance to learn.
That's pretty amazing.
And I was so proud of that. If anything, I was proud as to how they got along in a group.
Wow.
So but again, it was teaching them that we can work together, and that each of us brings in a special, powerful opinion or a talent or view, whatever it is, and it does help. And it makes them stronger. And I think because of that, I like teaching.
Wow. So that
Yeah.
must have been pretty nice to see everybody
Yeah.
work together and
Yeah.
collaborate and to accept multiple points of view.
Right.
So it's a good thing to learn when you're young.
Right, exactly. And
Yeah.
later on in life, if you have to work with somebody, you will have the tools now to do so.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Okay, so Eunice, are you aware of any barriers for women who wanted to become artists in the past?
yes, so I'm going to say to you, this goes back, way back, even in Europe. And it's still, some of these things are still a problem for women. In those days, women were not allowed to have a talent. If they did, it was usually shunned. It was done, like you could not talk about it. And there were a lot of women that could have painted for masters in their, their actual studios, but they never got the credit.
Okay, are we talking like what, 1500s or even
Yeah,
before?
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
when Caravaggio was around, even Leonardo and Michelangelo, all those people used to have these big studios because their paintings would take a whole year to paint, and they were usually history paintings. Somebody won the war for something, portraits of men, that were captains, whatever. So, and the paintings were large, very large. So, you had a chance to paint a little tiny area as an apprentice or as a woman, but you never got the credit.
Okay.
So that happened in those days. But when the Impressionism came about, it was another form of not having women being recognized. So we're talking Impressionism. So this still continues. Mary Cassatt was one of them that was part of the Impressionism, and she was not as well recognized as the other ones.
As the men.
Yeah.
Okay, hang on for just a second. We're going to take a break. So, from what I understand, Eunice, the women were not allowed to attend classes so that they could study anatomy or the nude paintings or drawings or the body composition, and so that's what kept them to doing just still life and things like that, and then kept them from doing these historic moments in history that you were talking about.
They did do little portraits, little round portraits. It was or a needlepoint. They were allowed to do that. But actual painting, large ones, they were not really known for that. Very few did make it, but still, it was always the male that got the credit. Another example of that is not only Impressionism, but even in Jackson Pollock. Jackson Pollock was known for his spilled little paintings, large ones in fact, and he lived out east in the Long Island. So he was married to Lee Krasner, and Lee Krasner had her own right of paintings. You would never really hear of her, but now if you go into museums, you will see her pieces. So she got the credit, but it took years after.
And an association with somebody who was already famous for her to be recognized.
Exactly.
And I think we've heard of multiple examples of that in the past as well. Do you still think that there are barriers for women in your profession?
Yes. It seems that the male artists get noticed first. Women have to work twice as hard to get noted for their talent, and they have to really put themselves out there. And it's really scary situation because your painting is a very personal,
Oh, I see.
emotional output of yourself.
Sure. Yeah.
So if some gallery doesn't take you in or rejects you, it's hard.
And I can imagine too that women are under a much bigger lens, more scrutiny than
Yes,
the male
yes.
counterparts.
Yes.
Who decides what art hangs in the museums?
Usually they have a curator for that they choose a theme or an artist, and they go out and they find where the pieces are. Art pieces, for example, some of Matisse's pieces are still in Europe, and at one time there was an exhibit of showing two paintings that were done side by side, and they finally put it together in an exhibit.
Oh, okay.
The other one, so for example, another thing was when Picasso passed away, they wanted his sculptures so badly, and he never had those sculptures ever been seen because they were his private garden, of these beautiful pieces. So they finally got a hold of that and showed it at the Museum of Modern Art, and it was all his pieces, and it was done with materials that he found.
Now, the curator that you talked about, is that a
Yeah.
single person or a committee?
Sometimes it's a committee. Sometimes it's a person that has enough pull in the museum.
In the art world.
Yeah.
Does it tend to be a political position sometimes?
Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is. Guggenheim Art Museum, when it was first built, the first artist that was shown was Kandinsky. And it came up to 100 years that they were showing, and they put Kandinsky back in. And it was such a nice exhibit because they showed the originals of what was seen in those days. Nowadays, they see a Kandinsky, but they don't realize his life work. It was very, very tight work. And at the very end, he got very loose. And it was good to see that.
How they progress.
Yeah, and because the Guggenheim is in a round spiral, it was nice to see all that artwork changing for every level.
Evolving, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you, evolving.
Wow, that's cool. What is your favorite subject to paint?
Something that I can actually do.
And you're getting better all the time.
Yeah, thank you. Oh gosh, I like organic, like faces, horses, dogs, cats. I find it more forgiving because if you do something that has squares and triangles, you have to be perfect. But with a human face, I just find how each area blends into the next. And it becomes almost abstract the way I look at it. And it comes together and it looks like the person. And that's the stuff that I like.
So it gives you a
It's
little more
challenge.
freedom. Maybe.
It's freedom, but it's also a challenge.
A little more of a challenge as well.
So
Okay.
portraits, yeah.
And last question, Eunice. What advice would you tell young women who want to become artists?
Don't give up. Don't give up the dream. You might be sidetracked. You might be discouraged. You might find somebody saying things about you and your pieces and whatever. Don't let that happen to you. Find that inner art sense and let it shine. Just keep going.
That's amazing. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Eunice, love ya.
Me too. I love you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
As I leafed through this book, Women Artists, I was struck by the injustice faced by women who had the compelling desire to share their ideas and emotions through their art. As posted on my YouTube book reviews, Dr. Gail Goodreads, and my website, livelongfeelgood.com, I know that women had definite struggles for generations in the sciences, but I did not expect the same in the art world, which I always assumed was more forgiving and tolerant, but apparently not so. We have made significant strides, and we have so much gratitude for the inspiration and endurance of these women artists and the men who were their mentors and supporters who helped them break down barriers so their work could be recognized and appreciated. The National Museum of Women in the Arts opened in 1987 in Washington, D.C. It's definitely on my list of things to see the next time I visit, and I hope it inspires you to see it as well. Thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.